obituary the Bechdel test. Oh, obliterated the Bechdel test. Hello all, 'twas mere moments ago that I for the first time witnessed the Barbie movie. I am a weirdo, so I took notes during the movie while I was in the theater. And here are my notes in the order that I wrote them, which is like scattered and terrifying. Just for context, I knew nothing about this movie going in. I saw one picture of Ryan Gosling with his painted on abs, and that's it. Are they painted on? You weigh in. Let me know. I think they are a little bit. Or like his pecs have these angles to them that I'm like, I think it's makeup. I'm not sure. Either way, it doesn't matter. But I am curious. I did talk to one person about the movie before this, and she mentioned that she felt like maybe it was pandering a little bit to like a feminist audience. And I'm not sure. I thought about that throughout the movie. I also thought that maybe some scenes could play for multiple sides, like people who think that the feminist movement has gotten out of hand might like elements of this movie and relate to it. It wasn't completely clear what was being satirized and what the producers of this movie, the directors, the writers, actually thought. Sponsor: cars, car brands. Another element that confused me is that there were a lot of analogies and metaphors, but I wasn't always sure what the metaphors were about. It got a little confusing, especially toward the end. I'll address that later. In the first scene, I'm really into Barbie's curly bangs. I love them. The beach off scene, clever, I loved it. An excellent example of intentional camp, Dua Lipa's wig. Oh. Why did they do that? Exactly who is Ken in this? That was a thought that I had throughout this. What does Ken represent? What doesn't he represent? What is the movie about? We can agree. Feminism. Sponsored by Birkenstocks. One of my comments was, has my character arc been from stereotypical to weird Barbie? Comment if you agree. One aspect of this film that I really liked and I just don't see represented in popular media, Barbie is very good at setting boundaries with Ken. Ken is like, can I stay over? Barbie's like, no. Nope. That kind of boundary setting is really hard. I also loved the way that women prioritized women in the film. I do not see that in mainstream films. Like, those things fundamentally feel good to see on screen. We have little caveman brains. Sometimes I have to see something to have it feel valued. When Ken and Barbie get into the real world, I do think they summed up very well the difference between how women are looked at by men and how men are looked at. There being an undertone of violence to it, right? And being exposed to that for the first time. I do think that contrast of worlds, going from one world to the other, and that being a way to emphasize the absurdism of, in this case, patriarchy, I think that's a really cool method, and I love that in utopic fiction in general. If someone was used to a world run by women, what would their reaction be to these things? That Netflix show, Sex Education, so much of the cast is in this movie. Why? I'm doing no research yet, so I do not know why. Someone should tell me, or I'll look it up right after this. I love Barbie getting called a fascist. That was good. That hit. If they were pandering, they effectively pandered. Pander away. Chew on that bamboo, you little panders. Here was another moment when I was confused about what stand they were actually making. Ryan, good old Ryan Gosling as Ken, goes to this business executive. He's like, hire me. I'm a man, so you should hire me. The executive's like, no, you need these credentials. You don't have them. And Ryan says, well, isn't just being a man enough? And the executive says, actually, now it's kind of the opposite. And then the executive also says, patriarchy does exist. We're just better at hiding it now. So are you trying to say that it is the opposite, that men can't get hired anymore? Or that patriarchy still exists? Is this a situation where you can think that men have it terribly and women have it great, and see this and think, yeah, the movie's on my side? Oh, I love the older women in this movie. That was another thing where I was like, wow, my monkey brain needed to just see older female assigned to birth people on screen. Electric seat was so cool. Oh, that was in the theater. In the movie theater I was in, they had electric seats and the foot part lifted up, and I just pushed a button and it lifted up and I was like, ah! They didn't mention race or gayness explicitly, even though it was the campiest movie I've second campiest movie I've ever seen. Some things probably, in order to effectively get funders for this movie, couldn't be explicitly stated, but there was still representation, and I think that the representation that was there matters. The executives that made Barbie. I'm really confused about the role they play. At first, what I was thinking is that the fact that the executives are in charge of Barbie and marketing her makes this whole film a lot darker. Barbie can never escape from these men. Maybe that hit home in some ways as like an accurate representation of our world. You can't get away from that to a certain extent. With the Barbie movie, I left like feeling some strength. And I know that's like corny, but it's true. Seeing some of the complexities of what it means to be a woman and just kind of a person in this world voiced on screen felt validating, and that matters. And I think having something that's really fun to watch that also has elements of it that actually make me feel good, not just gross. Example, when I'm depressed, I read YA novels, okay? And I tried at one point reading Twilight, and it felt good because it was like easy read. I'll turn the pages because I want to know when they smooch. But that relationship dynamic was so gross. So I had to feel gross to get this like easy entertainment. I think the Barbie movie did a really good job of like being soft, easy entertainment with having some things that felt like genuinely nice. This movie, I truly think, balanced a feminist-centric message of empowerment with the need to cater this movie to people who will fund it, right? Because you could make a super like radical, something that's perceived as radical feminist film, but it would get like, it could get no funding, so no one even sees it. Alan, gay Alan, I'm talking about gay Alan here. His lack of arc, it made me so sad. He didn't have any kind of voice really. So I think that's one of those places where it's like, yeah, clearly things had to be compromised for this film to exist as it does. Another thing that bummed me out, the America Ferrera character had no character development. The things we learned about her was because she explicitly said them. Nothing was shown to us. I really just wanted to have more of a connection with her, because I understand that Barbie isn't someone we can initially connect with, but then this human character who I felt was the most human and like I could relate to the most. I wish I could have had more of an opportunity to understand her. I think that would have brought like a whole deeper emotionality to the movie that I would have liked a lot. I also think that the role of men in this film was really interesting because they were made universally one-dimensional, just like how women are treated in every other movie. And I understand how that could be an intentional move to kind of role reverse men and women's typical roles in popular media, and it didn't paint a better vision for the future. Maybe it was a matter of limited time in order to flesh out what more three-dimensional male characters would do in order to adhere to a more feminist, more equal world. That like requires a lot, and maybe even requires more radical, meaning like out there or atypical ways of imagining our world and our future. Sponsor, Coco Chanel. I just thought there was a lot of potential there in that conflict. Like maybe they could have talked to the men about those internal contradictions that they had, right, as women, and asked the men if they had internal contradictions like that, right? And then that could have like sparked them into more humanity, just like it did for the Barbies. Sponsor, Calvin Klein. I feel like that was such a long dance scene, my God. Like, I get it, I don't know. Is that just me being gay, but not for men? Men crying, here's another contradiction where I feel like, are they catering to multiple sides here? Alan crying toward the end, and then Ryan Gosling crying, is played as a joke initially. The audience in my theater laughed because it was designed to make us laugh. Making the butt of the joke a man crying is dangerous. You are like not explicitly but implicitly saying that men should not cry. It's embarrassing, it's shameful. But then Margie is like, Margot? What is her name? Why can't I know her name? You know, Barbie. Blonde, skinny, neutral. Her. She says to Ryan Gosling, she's like, it's okay to cry. And he's like, I know, like, I'm an awakened man. Like, I know it's okay to cry. So then they're affirming that, yeah, men can cry, that's okay. And I feel like that's one of those things where it's like, haha, we're making this a joke, it's embarrassing, but then also it's okay. And maybe they're trying to cater to multiple sides, but also maybe that's just the confusing world we live in. And a world, I think, that's changing rapidly in terms of our gendered expectations. And I think I felt really internally conflicted in this film, and maybe things like that were part of it. I felt like also this film was really thoughtful and well done. It wasn't like another Spider-Man movie. No offense. Well, it's okay if people are offended by that. Like, I felt like a lot of care went into this film, a lot of thoughtfulness, and there was an element of just respect. Okay, when Ken says, I just don't know who I am without you, and he has that moment, is that an analogy for how women would feel without men, right? Is that what that is? But that's a really confusing analogy then, because I don't think the whole movie, the Kens are meant to represent women in our society. But in that moment, is he supposed to represent that? You tell me, give me your thoughts. So at the end of the movie, they're trying to empower Ken. But throughout the movie, the joke is like, these men are dumb. But it seems inherently disempowering to make someone a one-dimensional character and be like, haha, you dumb. I just felt confused. That whole concept of ordinary Barbie and how there is all this pressure, especially on women and just people of different marginalized identities, to be perfect in a bunch of different ways that are incompatible. I really appreciated that idea presented. There was a certain sadness I had. Maybe normal Barbie's goal is just to kind of get through a day and feel all right. Oh my God, the bar is so low. Like, we're just trying to get through the world and feel like fine-ish. Part of me felt like, yeah, that's really great to be able to sit with ourselves as ordinary. Truly a shocking moment for me was to realize that Margot Robbie will one day age and die. Which I think like proves kind of the point of the film. Like, to me, she's just like kind of this inhuman, like perfect, small nose blonde lady. Oh, I liked the moment when Barbie was instructed to close her eyes and feel. I really liked that. America Ferrera's husband needed no backstory. I was so glad he was one-dimensional. I loved him that way. One interesting thing for me was that I really wanted to come to some sort of conclusion on like what are the intentions here of the writers and directors? And especially in those places where I felt like there were contradictions. I had a really hard time sitting with that. And so that's kind of interesting for me to notice about myself. But that said, I'll probably read some sort of an analysis with an overly confident writer who tells me the thing that they think is true about the movie with so much confidence that I'm like, well, that's the fact. That's the singular fact of what this movie is. And now I am comfortable. I truly did leave the movie feeling better than when I went in. And like validated in some ways. So that's kind of cool. Also ignored in others, but I'm used to that. The bar is low. That's it. Thank you all. Like and subscribe if you want to.